What began as a promising luxury cruise vacation turned into a horrifying mystery on the calm seas. A family of 4 set sail together, but only 3 returned. The wife had vanished into the night without a trace. What truth lies hidden behind this disappearance? Join Crime Documentary Files as we explore today's case. The incident occurred aboard a luxury Italian cruise ship named Splendida. On February 9, 2017, the vessel departed from the port of Civitavecchia, Italy, beginning a lengthy journey. The route would take passengers to Genoa, Italy, then continue to Malta, Greece, and Cyprus, before returning to the starting point at Civitavecchia port. That day, the port buzzed with vacation excitement. Multi-generational families dragged their luggage with bright faces full of eager anticipation. Among the crowd gathered at the ship's entrance was an international couple, Ying, a Chinese woman, and Daniel Belling, her German husband. Both were accompanied by their 2 young sons. Ying had a petite figure, fair smooth skin, and the typical elegance of an East Asian woman, making her seem like a quiet island amidst the noisy crowd. She often chose a bright red scarf or striking jacket, creating a sharp contrast with her surroundings that made her appear even more reserved and introverted. Beside her was Daniel, a pale-skinned man with a gaunt face and somewhat pallid complexion, wearing simple, casual clothing that nonetheless conveyed a sense of rationality and practicality. The 2 children with them were full of life, the older one constantly pulling his parents' hands and pointing everywhere, running around playfully, while the younger one obediently nestled close to his mother. At this moment, they looked like any other normal family, enjoying the excitement and joy that their upcoming 11-day cruise would bring. However, what was shocking was that when this trip ended and all crew members disembarked to check passengers, they could not find Ying. The cruise ship staff were the first to notice something amiss. While cross-checking the passenger boarding and departure lists, they realized the numbers didn't match and immediately reported the missing passenger to Italian port authorities. The case was then transferred to police for investigation. The key question was, when did Ying disappear during the voyage? And what really happened on this ship? Police immediately launched a comprehensive investigation. The top priority was determining Ying's last known location on this massive cruise ship. Investigators outlined 2 possible scenarios. First, she was still hiding somewhere on the ship. Second, she had fallen overboard due to accident or foul play. However, the absence of a body meant all theories could only remain hypothetical. This made the case even more mysterious and difficult to understand. Through investigation, police determined that Ying was 36 years old at the time. She and her German husband Daniel had been long-term residents of Ireland. On February 9th, the family of 4, the couple and their 2 sons aged 4 and 6, had flown from Ireland to Italy before boarding the Splendida. February 10th marked the 2nd day of the journey. Early that morning, the cruise ship docked at the city of Genoa, Italy. Following standard cruise protocol, all passengers were issued electronic keycards before leaving the ship to track their movements. That morning, the family of 4 appeared at the port, Ying and Daniel with their 2 sons. They entered a souvenir shop that had just opened. Security camera footage showed Ying leading with the children, while Daniel followed behind. This distinctive East-West mixed family attracted attention. The 2 boys curiously observed everything around them, and the atmosphere seemed quite warm and happy at the time. At 1:44 p.m., they returned to the cruise ship together. That evening, at table 704 in the restaurant under bright lights, the couple and their 2 children dined together. They ordered the usual buffet items. The serving staff around them remembered this family chatting quite cheerfully. This dinner would be the last time ship personnel saw Ying. February 11th, the cruise ship continued its journey at sea without docking. Under the sunshine on the pool deck, passengers began to notice Daniel appearing alone with the 2 children. The older boy had a lively personality, occasionally running around playfully by the pool's edge. The younger one cried continuously. Daniel appeared quite tired but remained restrained and patient in comforting the children rather than showing irritation. What caught some passengers' attention was that these 2 boys seemed to always wear the same clothes for several days, often running around barefoot, creating an impression of being rather unkempt and poorly cared for. February 12th, entering the 4th day of the journey, the cruise ship docked at Valletta, the capital of Malta. This time, only Daniel took the 2 children ashore for sightseeing. On the ancient cobblestone streets of Valletta, they strolled leisurely, stopping to take typical tourist photos. However, around 9 p.m., a serious incident occurred. A crew member on patrol discovered the younger son standing alone outside their cabin door, crying hysterically with a panicked expression. Neither father nor mother was anywhere to be seen. The emergency was immediately reported to the security team. It took 40 minutes before they found Daniel and the older son in the movie theater. Clearly, Daniel had left the younger child sleeping in the cabin and taken the older one out for entertainment. When the younger child woke up and found no one there, he panicked and ran outside crying. The cruise management immediately issued a stern warning, demanding that Daniel absolutely not leave young children alone in cabins, especially those with balconies. February 13th, the cruise ship docked at the port of Katakolo, Greece. Once again, only Daniel took the 2 children off the ship for sightseeing. Upon returning to the ship, he made a rather strange request to the housekeeping staff, asking to change the room configuration from 4 beds to 3 beds, with the reason being only 3 people need to rest. In the following days, whether on the deck, in restaurants, or any public areas, people only saw the image of a father with 2 children. No one encountered Ying anymore. It wasn't until the final day of the journey, when the cruise ship docked at Civitavecchia in Rome and passengers began disembarking, that control personnel suddenly realized something alarming. This family had clearly boarded as 4 people, but now only 3 were getting off. Here are 2 details that particularly caught police attention. The first was the period when the family of 4 boarded the cruise ship. The combination of this couple was already quite unusual. A tall German man and a petite Chinese woman, standing only about 5 feet tall. The stark physical difference made them appear somewhat mismatched and difficult to harmonize. Some passengers recalled that Ying had shouted at her husband at the time, but the man remained silent, never responding, and continued walking straight toward the ship's entrance. This scene left a deep impression in the memories of those who witnessed it. The second detail occurred on the 2nd day of the journey when the cruise ship stopped in Genoa. Around 10 a.m., when the souvenir shop had just opened, Ying and the children entered first, with Daniel following behind looking annoyed. The sales staff still clearly remembered the scene when he pulled a pair of sneakers from his backpack, threw them down hard beside his wife, and shouted loudly, "Stop wearing flip-flops! Put on these shoes and shut up!" The sudden shout in the quiet space startled everyone in the store, which is why this image was etched in their memory. So why did the crew only discover a missing passenger on the final day? The reason lay in the cruise ship's management procedures. At each port stop, the crew performed checks on the number of people boarding and disembarking. In fact, Ying was recorded as leaving the ship at Genoa and then returning normally. But after that point, she had no further records of boarding or disembarking. For the ship's staff, this didn't raise suspicion, as many passengers throughout the journey preferred to stay on the cruise ship and not participate in shore activities. Moreover, the keycard system could only confirm whether someone had returned to the ship, but couldn't continuously track whether that passenger had left again. This loophole caused Ying disappearance to only be discovered when the cruise ship reached its final destination. What was more puzzling was Daniel's attitude. As a husband, he showed no signs of worry or panic. He never sought help from the crew, never searched for his wife, but instead maintained an air of indifference as if everything was within normal bounds. This coldness raised inevitable suspicions. Police quickly recognized the abnormality. They immediately went to the airport and intercepted Daniel just as he was preparing to board a flight back to Ireland, then arrested him. The question was, faced with questions about his wife's mysterious disappearance, what explanation would Daniel offer? What sent chills down people's spines was his attitude. Throughout his wife's disappearance, Daniel showed no worry and certainly didn't proactively contact police or notify the crew. Instead, he maintained an unusually calm demeanor, almost indifferent. Faced with police questioning, Daniel stated that on the evening of February 12th, the couple had argued over a trivial matter. Ying complained of being tired and said she wanted to leave the cruise ship. The next day, when they docked, he took the two children off the ship to walk around, and when they returned, he discovered his wife and a large suitcase had disappeared. According to him, because Ying had an unpredictable personality and had often left suddenly before, he guessed this time she might have gone back to China or to Ireland. On the surface, the story made it seem like Ying had voluntarily abandoned her husband and children to leave, but police didn't believe Daniel's explanation. When they searched the cabin, they quickly discovered numerous suspicious points. Indeed, Ying orange suitcase and Chinese passport had disappeared, but other essential items remained. The jacket she usually wore, her familiar shoes, wallet, phone, identification documents, and even more important papers. Notably, Ying had never applied for early departure from the ship, and her door card showed no additional entry or exit records. In other words, within the ship's strict surveillance system of cameras and security, it was nearly impossible for her to mysteriously vanish while dragging a suitcase. Therefore, police began to suspect that Ying might have been murdered by Daniel, then stuffed into the suitcase. Then, taking advantage of the dark night, he quietly pushed it overboard from the 11th floor balcony. This area was both dark and noisy, making the chance of being noticed almost zero. To test this hypothesis, police invited a woman with a similar build to Ying to participate in an experiment. The results were chilling. A body of that size could completely fit into a suitcase and be dragged away easily. This experiment strongly reinforced police suspicions that Daniel was indeed connected to his wife's mysterious disappearance. Faced with the evidence police presented, Daniel's explanations quickly revealed countless holes. He admitted the marriage was tense, but insisted that neither had ever considered divorce or separation. According to Daniel, they believed that with persistent psychological treatment, the relationship could be mended, and moreover, if they separated, both would lose certain benefits. He also cited an additional detail. Right when the family had just boarded the ship, the cruise photographer had taken a group photo, and in that picture, he was still wearing his wedding ring. However, a few days later, in subsequent photos, the wedding ring had suddenly disappeared. What made people even more suspicious was that a few days later, someone discovered clear scratches under Daniel's eyes and on his neck. When asked, he casually replied that they were marks left from playing with the children. But when the trial began, Daniel's testimony became even more convoluted and contradictory. Initially, he insisted that his wife might have gone back to China or Ireland. Later, he changed his story, saying that Ying wanted to stay in Greece with the Chinese community to attend a business meeting. Then he even suggested that his wife might have held some secrets that others didn't want exposed, so she was murdered. When the holes became increasingly numerous, he finally simply exercised his right to remain silent. This series of contradictory statements, combined with abnormalities in objective evidence, made people inevitably suspect that behind this was not a normal marital dispute, but rather a premeditated murder. According to investigation, this cruise trip was actually Ying initiative from several months earlier. She had even paid for the entire family's expenses herself. In her view, this trip was the last opportunity for her and Daniel to repair their relationship. Therefore, it was almost impossible for her to abandon it midway for work reasons. The Italian judge reviewing the case believed that Daniel's many suspicious behaviors, especially his never proactively reporting his wife missing, constituted sufficient reason for his arrest. Just as he was preparing to board a flight to Ireland, he was intercepted by police. The judge also pointed out that if they had allowed him to leave then, once he returned to Ireland, they might never have been able to track him down again. Daniel was subsequently detained in a Rome prison, and police investigation didn't stop there. They continued to dig deeper into the case details, trying to find more substantive evidence to clarify Ying mysterious disappearance. Just as the case reached a deadlock, Ying mother in China, Mrs. Niu, proactively contacted Italian police. It turned out that a friend of hers who knew English had seen news reports about Ying disappearance and immediately informed her. Upon hearing this, Mrs. Niu rushed to Italy. The mother told police that the last time she video called her daughter was on February 9th, the very day the cruise ship departed. At that time, Ying was extremely happy and full of expectations for the journey ahead. Usually, mother and daughter maintained the habit of communicating via WeChat, sometimes chatting several times a day. However, from February 10th onward, all messages she sent received no response. Initially, she thought her daughter was just too busy having fun to reply, but when she heard about the disappearance, she was shocked to realize the severity of the situation. When she came to Italy, Mrs. New visited her son-in-law Daniel, who was being detained. Standing before the cold prison bars, she couldn't help but ask the painful question, "Did you kill my daughter?" Daniel only whispered back, "Maybe my wife chose to commit suicide," but firmly insisted that he absolutely did not murder her. In a television interview, Mrs. New affirmed that her daughter was a strong, independent person who wouldn't easily give up, and certainly couldn't abandon her two young children to leave alone. She also shared that Daniel in Ireland had always appeared gentle and calm, making it hard for others to think he could harm his wife. Even when visiting the prison, she brought and gave Daniel the maximum amount of money a prisoner could possess in jail. She still extended trust to her son-in-law, but at the same time, in her mother's heart, she firmly believed her daughter would never commit suicide by jumping into the sea just because of depression. During the lengthy trial process, many past details and previously unknown dark aspects of the couple's life gradually came to light. Daniel, who was 45 when the incident occurred, was born in Germany to an unhappy family. His father died young, and his mother remarried an alcoholic man. His childhood was marked by oppression and meals heavy with the smell of alcohol, forcing Daniel from a young age to learn silence, endurance, and withdrawal. Only when he was accepted to Dublin Institute of Technology did he escape his dark past to find opportunities to build a different life. As a student, Daniel chose computer science but also studied nursing, an odd combination that reflected his rational yet reserved personality. In 2001, Daniel moved to Dublin, Ireland's capital, beginning his career journey through various large corporations. He worked at Xerox, Canada Life, HP, and then Microsoft, mainly in technical support roles. By 2012, he was hired by Apple, a milestone that brought his life onto a stable trajectory. What surprised many acquaintances was that in their eyes, Daniel had always been introverted, seemingly uninterested in women. However, in 2007, when he began dating Ying, all his friends around him were astonished. The two had completely opposite personalities. Daniel was quiet and reserved, while Ying, 9 years younger, was lively, open, and passionate. Ying was a woman with a strong entrepreneurial spirit. She had worked at a television station and later participated in various projects related to tourism and cruise ships. Before the tragedy occurred, Ying was running a company called Cinderella, specializing in wedding services for the Chinese community in Ireland. In 2010, when both decided to marry, their lives entered a difficult period. At that time, Daniel was unemployed, they could only rent a small apartment, and were constantly pressured by their landlord about rent arrears. The situation became even more tense when they unauthorized sublet to others and kept pets in the apartment. The landlord filed a lawsuit, and police were called. When law enforcement arrived, Daniel refused to cooperate and was eventually forcibly removed. A few days later, when Ying returned to collect their belongings, she was accused of illegal entry and even faced theft charges. Fortunately, by the end of that year, when Daniel bought their own house, all the new charges were dismissed. In 2011, Daniel and Ying caused another disturbance when they attempted to take over property management of their housing complex. They went door to door, sending letters urging residents to overthrow the current management board so they could take charge themselves. But due to their complete lack of experience, shortly after, some households lost electricity, causing fierce anger and disputes in the complex. Finally, Daniel had to call police to intervene before the situation temporarily calmed down. By 2014, Ying graduated with a bachelor's degree in hotel management from Dublin Institute of Technology and gave birth to their second child. This should have been a happy and warm time for the small family, but reality couldn't soothe the conflicts that had been simmering. Arguments became increasingly frequent. Daniel began complaining to colleagues about his wife's strong personality and cultural differences that prevented them from finding common ground. This situation caused Daniel to fall into depression, even requiring hospitalization for treatment at times. The climax came in August 2016, when neighbors were shocked to discover a man spending the night in the building's stairwell. Upon closer inspection, they realized it was Daniel. He explained that after an argument, his wife had kicked him out of the house. Faced with neighbors' concern, when someone asked why he didn't go to a hotel, Daniel just shook his head, smiled awkwardly, and said, "It's okay, everything will be fine." This was a snapshot of their marriage, conflicts that were never truly resolved, only continuously recurring like an endless spiral. From summer 2015 to fall 2016, Yinglei's mother frequently came to Dublin to help care for the grandchildren. During this period, she witnessed firsthand her daughter and son-in-law arguing almost constantly. Many times, Daniel was kicked out of the house, forced to spend nights wandering outside. Once the conflict escalated to the point where Daniel, without any explanation, simply sent a brief text message and immediately took the child and flew to Germany. When the whole family returned to Dublin, Yinglei met them at the airport, but that very evening, the two continued to argue fiercely. The next morning, the mother discovered a clear bruise on her daughter's wrist. Daniel, once again kicked out of the house, could only return early in the morning for meals and to take the child to school. This tug-of-war lasted half a month, with neither side willing to yield. Although Yinglei's mother often felt her daughter was too harsh in dealing with her husband, Yinglei always insisted she not interfere. In reality, this marriage had been fractured for a long time. Around 2017, both had even filed for mutual restraining orders, a clear sign that their discord had exceeded normal limits. Yet they still didn't divorce because the economic ties binding them were too tight to easily sever. It turned out that as early as March 2014, Daniel had begun a path of deception. To get money to buy a house, he forged a series of documents: a German ID card with an incorrect birth date, a fake salary statement inflating his income to 90,000 euros, along with altered bank statements. Using these falsified documents, Daniel successfully deceived the Bank of Ireland and obtained a loan of 112,500 euros to buy a house worth 125,000 euros. Previously, he had applied for loans 3 times but was rejected each time. After buying the house, the couple immediately rented it out, using rental income to pay the loan, a calculation that seemed quite clever. If successful, they could even repeat this model to own more properties. However, the plan quickly fell apart. The tenant only paid for a short time before falling behind, turning the monthly loan payment into a massive burden. When the incident occurred, the house still owed 96,000 euros in unpaid debt. Daniel even had to borrow 46,000 euros from his sister to temporarily fill the gap. Later, the couple listed the house for sale at 310,000 euros, hoping the profit margin would help offset their debts. But unfortunately, the house never sold. And precisely during this period of financial stress, Yinglei suddenly disappeared. During the trial phase, under pressure from public opinion and mounting suspicion, Daniel firmly blamed his wife. He testified that the entire idea of falsifying loan documents was Yinglei's suggestion, and the fake salary statements and ID cards were also handled by Chinese contacts she knew who specialized in document forgery. Daniel deliberately emphasized his wife's role, as if to prove he was merely someone drawn into the situation. However, this testimony wasn't entirely convincing. The judge found Daniel's arguments full of contradictions and even questioned whether he might be hiding other details in his wife's mysterious disappearance. But due to lack of concrete evidence, the court could only sentence Daniel to 3.5 years in prison for document forgery and some other minor violations. Strangely, the sentence was suspended, a ruling that many found puzzling and controversial. Yinglei's whereabouts remained shrouded in mystery. Throughout 14 months of investigation and trial, Italian police found no traces of her, nor discovered any clues that could directly lead to the truth. According to local law, without formal charges or a clear criminal trial, a suspect could only be detained for a maximum of 1 year. After that period, if there was still no conclusive evidence, they had to be released. So on April 24, 2018, Daniel was suddenly freed. Stepping out of prison, he appeared indignant mixed with melancholy, insisting he was completely innocent. Daniel declared that his wife had most likely returned to China, while he was just a wrongfully accused victim who had to sit in prison for a whole year without reason. He even blamed Ying as heartless for abandoning her husband and children like that. But immediately after, Daniel changed his tone, saying he wasn't angry either, because her personality was always peculiar. Daniel quickly returned home to Dublin, Ireland. However, although he was released, the investigation targeting Daniel continued. By July 2020, Italy suddenly announced that the preliminary investigation was complete, and Daniel would face 2 serious charges: murder and destruction of a corpse. Combined, these charges amounted to nearly life imprisonment. Upon receiving this news, Daniel declared he was utterly shocked. He still insisted he was innocent. His legal team immediately raised several questionable points. For example, on March 21, 2017, Ying's credit card was suddenly used to pay a highway toll in Ireland, while Daniel was imprisoned in Rome and couldn't have done it himself. Even stranger, Daniel's nephew once came to the couple's house in Dublin, wanting to collect some personal items to send to prison for Daniel. He couldn't open the door with his key and discovered the locks had been changed. When police later opened the door to look, everything inside was neat and orderly, not at all like someone had broken in. Daniel said that besides himself, the only person with a key was Ying. The lawyer also revealed that Ying's phone contained romantic text messages, showing she maintained an inappropriate relationship with someone using an Irish number. More importantly, Ying had confided to a psychologist that she felt living in Ireland was like being in prison, wanting to leave the children with her husband and return to China alone. However, in police eyes, none of these statements were sufficient to clear suspicion. The only evidence they considered favorable was the testimony of the older child. Under psychological guidance, the 6-year-old boy recalled that one night on the cruise ship, Daniel told the children to stay in their room, saying he was taking mother somewhere, but in the end, only he returned alone. Whenever the children asked where mother went, Daniel would only give vague answers or change the subject. If the children continued asking, he would sternly tell them to be quiet. This testimony directly exposed Daniel's previous lies. Ying's disappearance very likely occurred at night, not during the day. Due to his connection to the case, Daniel temporarily couldn't find employment in Ireland. He even indicated he was considering changing his name later to start a new life. When a reporter asked, "Do you think your wife is still alive?" he said flatly, "No, I don't think so. But even if she really returned, I wouldn't live with her anymore. Separation would probably be better for us." By May 2024, the case took an unexpected turn. Daniel flatly refused to fly from Ireland to Italy for trial. As a result, with the defendant absent, the Rome Circuit Court directly convicted him of murder. The sentence was even heavier than the 24-year prison term the prosecution had initially requested. However, it's important to understand that the Circuit Court is only the first instance in Italy's judicial system. For this sentence to have final effect, it must go through 2 more levels of review, lasting at least several years. Daniel's lawyer appeared extremely confident, believing the entire ruling was based only on circumstantial evidence with no direct proof whatsoever. Therefore, the possibility of overturning the situation in subsequent trials was very high. Daniel himself also declared with certainty he would appeal to the end. The most ironic thing is that this heavy sentence has virtually no real impact on Daniel. He's not in Italy and isn't being extradited, so he continues to live comfortably in Ireland. To neighbors, it's as if the incident never happened. They still see Daniel casually walking around, living a normal life. So where is Ying? Is she still alive or dead? The mystery of what happened aboard the Splendida cruise ship remains unsolved. Despite years of investigation, court proceedings, and international attention, no definitive answers have emerged. The case raises troubling questions about justice, maritime law enforcement, and the challenges of investigating crimes that occur in international waters. While Daniel maintains his innocence and lives freely in Ireland, a family remains shattered, and a woman's fate remains unknown. What do you think happened to Ying? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for following this case, and we'll see you in the next video.